All right, Christian, thanks for that. And we're here for today's roundtable, playing a game of Would You Rather with two of our favorite freight folks here at FreightWaves. Of course, Thomas Wasson joining me once again. We've got Zach Strickland here as well to discuss about some of the hot topics right now in the freight industry and decide if you guys would take one option or the other. So starting off with some of these top stories, we've got a situation going on in Mexico. Our Borderlands reporter Noah Mahoney has talked about this, where we had the potential for a driver strike due to safety. What's going on there? Of course, Mexico is very high in cargo theft. A lot of drivers saying, hey, we're not safe on the roads. We can't do our jobs. So here's the question. If you are a driver in Mexico, would you rather take your chances and keep moving freight or sit down to negotiate with the Mexican National Guard and government? No guarantees that they are not also in on some of the dangerous activity going on there. Thomas?
Oh, man. I would just hope my company is paying the appropriate bribes as I go up through these corridors, because the biggest challenge with Mexico is the federal police generally is in pretty good shape, but some of the state polices are maybe, getting a little bit extra on the side. So, I mean, you got to drive. I would continue driving, but the issue is that because of the increase in cargo theft, you would want to see something from the centralized government of Mexico to try and ship it out. So that's such a tough one, just because on those border areas, it is like the Wild West.
Mm-hmm. Zach, what are your thoughts?
I mean, this is one of those, do you take the moral high ground? Do you try to change things, make that stand, or do you kind of support your livelihood? Mm-hmm. And I think, you got to support your livelihood. You keep driving. I mean, people in Mexico, they know what the deal is down there at this point. And for you to make some sort of substantial impact in that environment, you really it's going to take more than a driver to make that happen. And I agree with Thomas. You just got to keep rolling.
Just got to keep rolling. Interesting there. And hopefully you don't lose your livelihood by losing your life instead. Not a good trade-off there. All right, let's move on to our second topic. We saw our founder and CEO, Craig Fuller, put out a really great article this last week talking about the influx of small fleets, 1 to 5 trucks right now in this space. So the question with this one is, if you're an owner-operator who is in this market, who maybe started, let's say, 20 to 2021, right? Does size actually matter for you? Do you look at joining a smaller mom-and-pop fleet, 1 to 5, even 5 to 10 trucks? Or in a depressed economic time, do you look at joining a larger fleet instead? Zach, I'll start with you.
I'm going to go ahead and stick with what I've got. I worked this hard to get to this point of independence. I'm going to ride this out. I know it's depressed, but think about the fact that I only have to find my next load.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like I have to deal with scale. And a lot of these drivers already have that relationship built in. So they became independent for a reason. And it's not like they just walked in the door and said, I got to go find all this business. Most of them already have that set up. And especially, they have their relationships and the infrastructure built to keep their pipeline kind of filled, even in a depressed environment like we have.
Thomas, you're an enterprise fleet expert. So I'm going to go ahead and say that you are answering this question from an unbiased perspective, relieving yourself of the thought of being an enterprise fleet expert. Do you think that a 1 to 5 to 5 to 10 is a safer bet than joining maybe a Schneider or a US Express at a time like this?
If you're 5 to 10, stay with what you're doing. You have the assets. You could try to become an agent carrier and try to get it to the network. But if it's like if you're the one out of the 1 to 5, I would consider it. You're not going to be, by considering this, the reason you're doing it is because you are forgoing the opportunity for more revenue by going onto their network, but for safety and loads. If you're having trouble booking, that's the biggest point. So I'm going to make the contrarian argument. If you're a smaller 1 to 5, join a larger fleet because you can always just leave. I've had drivers just quit, turn in the keys, put it on the dipstick. If you already have your truck paid off, you're not, even with the contracts, I've seen them just shred. They don't care about the contracts. So, it's a very, don't feel like you're missing out too much because you can hop in with a large fleet, ride in their network for a little while, keep the lights on, and then as soon as we see the market move, just hop off the train, and then you can go back to doing what you do. Because that's what happens a lot of times in the market. That's why the labor data is so hard, because they just jump back and forth.
I feel like this is like a grass is greener situation, right? If you're large, you want to go small. If you're small, you want to go large.
Completely. Feels like it. Well, they tell you that. They're like, oh, lease on. You can dispatch and pick your own loads. And then you pick your own loads. You're like, man, this is rough. And you go back to, that is one of the biggest things that we don't mention in trucking is the concept of these company drivers get this taste or this idea of becoming a lease purchase. And it's not always greener.
Yeah, but it's the trade-off. You've got freedom of choice, or you don't have to work on that sales and that building that pipeline relationship.
It's all about the choice, right?
It's
As long
life.
as you've got the choice to
Yeah.
make. All right, let's move on to our next topic here. We talked about this in headlines. Arizona decided to shell out a pretty penny to build a border wall out of shipping containers, about 3,000 shipping containers exactly. Now, the federal government, the Department of Justice, threw them a lawsuit saying, hey, you guys trespassed on federal land to do this without permits. And they've had to pay an additional $64 million to now take all of these containers down off of their border wall and release them back. I don't know what they do with empty containers that were used for this. Texas, on the other hand, also has a border wall made out of shipping containers, only about a couple hundred yards long as opposed to Arizona's 4-mile stretch. If you are Texas now, you're watching Arizona kind of grapple with this. Do you take down your shipping container wall and, take it down because it's only a couple hundred yards long? Or do you leave it up as symbolism and say, you know what, even if it doesn't function as well, it's still there. It's still a border wall.
Ooh, tough call. I mean, shipping containers make such poor walls. I mean, if I'm a coyote moving people across the border, I'm just gonna look at that and laugh. So, I mean, at this point, you've already made the decision. Go all in, leave them up there. I mean, if you'll be able to find their crossing points because they're going to take a giant set of saws and saw right through it. So at the very least, you'll know where the routes are and the trails. But yeah, I'm just going to say in for a penny, in for a pound. Just put more. Take Arizona's containers. If you're already being a meme about it, just go for it. It could be a house in Portland.
Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's worth messing with, to be honest. You've kind of made your point now that the message is out there. I don't see any big gain in pulling it down. People can easily bypass containers.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? You've got a several 100-yard stretch and just walk around it.
It's like the video games where they had the guy with the fence and he couldn't get through the fence.
So he just walks.
He just goes around.
Exactly. All right. Maybe not the smartest move. And I got to say, Arizona questioning you a little bit, right? $95 million to build it, $2.1 million paid out to the DOJ now in fines, and an additional $64 million to take it down.
I mean, you could use drones. There's so many better ways to catch people than putting shipping containers. It's like, how much does it cost in fuel to haul it there?
I think they were trying to send a message. I don't think they were actually building it for functionality. So, I mean...
It's all about the symbolism, right? All right. Speaking of symbolism, let's move on to our next question. This one talks about what we just talked with John Kingston about, is the decision of a very small group of drivers at Warner to go ahead and unionize. As he mentioned, this is kind of the first example of a major truckload carrier like this seeing this type of unionization. Do you, if you are leading Warner, do you negotiate with them and find a contract, or do you just get ready to go ahead and say, nah, we're done, we're not unionizing? Zach?
Ooh.
Oh, dude, there's no way you want to let a union into your organization as a trucking carrier. It's just one more layer of bureaucracy, and I know that there's, I'm not here to make the argument for that specific group of people, but as I'm speaking from the bigger organization, you never want to have to deal with another negotiator. Obviously, maybe it makes sense to have, for them, from their perspective, to have this situation. But from the Warner's perspective, you don't necessarily want to have to deal with a group of people that doesn't have all of the information. And that's typically what happens as you get into these cycles with the unions and the groups that don't have your best interests. They have their interests at heart. So why would you want to deal with the people with growing leverage to negotiate with from a pure Warner perspective? And in the long run, I just can't see it working out for this group of people either in the organization of Warner.
Thomas, what do you think?
The business model does not work with unionized labor. The business model was made because of the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, and it was purposely designed to undercut the unions. We can't go backwards. Burn it all down, I say. Sell the facility, lay everybody off, send a message, because that's the issue. The reason carriers don't like the U word, and they really don't like the words about union, is because right now drivers are being exploited for inefficiencies in the supply chain. If you don't drive, I don't have to pay you. If you're detained, you're paid per mile. I don't have to pay you. Now you're asking for all of this stuff. You're asking for quality of life. Heck no, we won't go, I say, sir. You must get rid of all of it and cut it out if your business model is to survive. Is this right morally? Well, I'm a trucking expert, not a moral expert, folks. So sell the facility, get rid of it all, send a message.
I mean, there's not a big win there for either party. party.
Yeah.
No.
It's like a hydra, right? You
Yeah.
can't just cut off one head because another one will grow in its place. All right, final question for you guys. We're moving into the start of real college football season coming up this weekend. I say real because there were some games played last weekend, but like the big ones start coming up this year. Okay, both of y'all are Tennessee grads. I won't hold that against you as an Oklahoma grad myself. All I'm saying is that Baker Mayfield beat you guys twice. Whatever. If you could guarantee that if Tennessee beats Georgia, then they would lose to Alabama, or if they beat Alabama, then they would lose to Georgia. Which one would you rather have the win and loss go to? And I'm going to throw you a third option. If you could guarantee that Tennessee beats Florida every year, they would lose to Georgia and Alabama. Which one are you picking?
Alabama for me. Like this is
win or
this is-
loss to? Like beat
We're
Alabama?
going to beat Alabama.
Okay.
Like I want that more than anything at this point. So the hierarchy goes Alabama, Florida, everyone else.
Okay, fair enough.
Florida. My hierarchy of hate goes Florida for sure. Just beat them, and you can go like 7-5. And then Georgia and Alabama. I mean, that's okay. Alabama's an OG rivalry. I would like to see Alabama get beaten, but that's wishful thinking right now. Florida all the way because they beat us for so long and they're smug, and Steve Spurrier and his wonderful remarks. There's just a lot of despising Urban Meyer. Just it runs deep in my bones.
You know what? And I'm going to have to transition my hierarchy of hate, I think, as we move to the SEC next year. But Texas will always hold that top spot for me.
They're posers. We bailed them out. The University of Tennessee, Knoxville, our Corps of Cadets went in the Mexican-American War and bailed out that poser UT. Their orange isn't even right. So yes, Texas, you're welcome. Have fun with your containers. We'll come back and fix it up for you again.
It's a crispy burnt orange. All right, guys, thank you for joining us for Would You Rather. Great to have y'all as always. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back to wrap up the show in just a few minutes.